I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read.
And I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. I am so conservative.
I have to say, first, welcome to the Unknown Webcast. And I have to say that Ron Hensel and I have been social distancing for years. But I got to thinking this morning that when the days of social distancing are over for the nation in general, and we emerge from the safe spaces of our homes, will we recognize friends and extended family any longer? Will social cues need to be relearned? Will anyone notice or care that I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving? In the meantime, on social media, those who may be new to this webcast may still need a trigger warning that this is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged. Today's March 31, 2020, and when this year's over, we will have 2020 hindsight. This is broadcast number 183. Joining us this week is our friend Pastor Al Stewart, to talk about his new book, Wendy, Beauty from Ashes. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher co-host is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast from his social distancing location.
Yeah, I social distanced before it was cool.
Here is Ronnie
They called it anti-social distance when I did it.
Anti-social distance.
By the way, Don, are those new glasses?
Yeah. No.
No? Okay. Why do they look new?
Maybe.
You don't know.
I know what's happening here. Let me put my other.
We're all getting old, are we?
I have computer glasses and non-computer glasses. That's what it is.
Okay.
How's that? Is that better?
No, I'm just, they look fine. The other ones look fine. Anyways, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees would normally come out, see their shadows, and say there's 12 more months of summer, but they're all sheltering in place right now, and I don't know what happened. They're just not here. If you're hearing some weird sound from my background, it's the beagle that we inherited from my son when his landlord told him it was creating a noise problem. And now it's creating one here. But anyways, yeah, Don, I really think that we are going to have a hard time recognizing each other. And that's why we should have before and after pictures of when we were, okay, where is it going here? This is bad. One day I will figure out how to work this screen share thing. And Pastor Al just left. I don't know where he went. But in any case, we should probably give people before and after pictures so they know who they're talking to. And we're already getting some of these before and after pictures from the COVID virus problem. Here's a pre-lockdown and post-lockdown of somebody you might know. But in any case, our sponsors for Pastor Al, you're back. Yeah, now you can see the kind of pre-lockdown, post-lockdown pictures we're looking for to help people recognize us when this crisis is over. So, in the meantime, our sponsors for this webcast include the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience, the Bible Buffet, and two great faiths that taste great together, Reese's Jesus Buddha Cups, And if you enjoy our program, or if you don't, and you really just want to inflict it on somebody else, please, to ensure continued access, go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. And there he goes again. We keep losing you. There. Oh, here he is, right there, Pastor
There
Al.
There we go.
But you know what?
Yeah.
I want to do one more
I'm
thing.
here.
We need to do a quick news bulletin from those fine reporters at the Babylon Bee.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Babylon Bee, study COVID-19 impacts men and women more than all other genders combined.
Which is
Can you
really,
imagine?
I would have never guessed. I would think it would be like, I don't know, they would be like 38 and 39 on the list of.
I mean, there's like 74 genders, but it seems to only impact men and women.
And you know, all the other genders, I'm gathering from media that they're all more important than male and female, because they get most of the
press
social
these days.
justice coverage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Okay, well, hey, Pastor Al, it's great to have you here. I have prepared a slide for this occasion. We are going to look at your book, which is Wendy, Beauty from Ashes. And we have, it's told by Sharon Throop. So I take it she's a friend of yours?
Yeah, Sharon Troop. Sharon is Wendy's mom.
You don't pronounce it Throop.
Yeah. Which is exactly what I said when I met her.
Is she German?
It was her husband, which was Wendy's stepdad, Bill, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I just know the H is silent. It's pronounced just like Troop.
That's German.
Yes. It probably. I think Sharon's actually going to be. Well, she'll certainly be watching in. But if she sends me a message during the program, we'll get an answer to that question. But it's pretty much about the divine appointment that I had back in 1999 into 2000 with Sharon and Bill, about 3 years after Wendy took her life.
Which is really sad. Go ahead, Don.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say, because situations like this can be really difficult on families. I don't know, most, probably none who are watching this today would know that my father had taken his life when he had turned 41, and my parents had divorced. He had cut off all relationships with us as a family, although I attempted several times to contact him. And the night before, he had called and left a message. Hadn't heard from him in several years, and just left a message that he called. And the next day, I got a call that he had committed suicide. So that was very, very difficult for me. I was a new believer at that time, and it took me a few years to get past that. And then a number of things happened that really helped me to help others who are experiencing that. So I'm not sure how that correlates to this, but I do have a concern for this. This is not about apologetics. This is about, how does God work in your life in spite of difficult circumstances, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does apply, because, you've been through it, you're walking through it. I also would not be surprised if over the years you have had the opportunity to share your testimony in that area with others who have lost loved ones. God does that. That's what he does. And so what happened with me was, it was in the winter of 1999. I was ministering to parents whose children who had lost children to suicide. It was kind of like an after the fact ministry. And I was talking to 5 or 6 or whatever. And then I just, through this divine appointment, one night went downstairs, was not even doing a search on suicide, and somehow or another came across her daughter's page, and they're from Northeast Ohio, and I just really broke. It's kind of strange, but in the book, one of the things I talk about is how a young lady I've never met, how God used her to change my life, and many others, I might add. But what I did is I turned around and did what every good Christian would do. And I emailed her mom, and I said, hey, listen, I was really touched by your page. I said all the right things. You know, Jesus was there, you know, the Lord was there, and it's okay. And she kind of sent me back a few emails that kind of, you know, kind of put me in my place. I'll just say that. And I think a lot of Christians would have probably given up right there. But, you know, if you know me, I don't give up. And in Jesus' name. And what happened was we started a conversation over the next 5 months that went into the spring of 2000. And the real kind of hero of the story, I guess, is Bill, Wendy's stepdad, Sharon's husband, because he, number one, he had bought her a computer so that she could get online and talk with others in the community who have lost, you know, who had lost their children, which is what she was doing. But she was very, you know, kind of angry, upset. And so we started to talk, and Bill was the one that really had a tremendous amount of guilt because his gun case was left open the day that she drove back from school, totally unexpectedly, about a week before Thanksgiving in November of '96, and took her life, obviously, and used the gun from the cabinet. And so he was dealing with that. And what happened is, over the period of time, he started reading my responses and saying, hey, this guy's right. And one thing led to another, and that culminated in me pulling out a map. There was no GPS then. Pulling out a map and looking and realizing that was 451 miles from my house in Wolcott, Connecticut to Geneva, Ohio, and jumped in the car like 4 days later, went out there and led them to the Lord, got them involved with a good local church. And, you know, in fact, we had an incredible divine appointment that night, because that night we went out to eat. I said, listen, I want to take you to your favorite place. I took him to this local church, got him to meet the pastor, Pastor Walker. I said, you got 2 new members, and I'm going to be checking on you, which I did check with him to make sure that he stayed in touch with them. And he did. And they stayed there for about 5 years. It was exactly the place they needed to be. But we went out that night to grab something to eat. I said, I'd like to take you to your favorite place. Where is it? And there was this place called Lou's Billow Beach. I'll never forget it. I think it's closed now. It's been closed for a few years, and it's right on the banks of Lake Erie. We went there, and I've never had this happen before or since, but the waitress walked up to our table, wrote something on a piece of paper, sat it in the middle of the table, said, I'll be right back. I'm here to serve you tonight, and my name is Wendy. And when this woman came back, the 3 of us, the 4 of us were just, 3 of us were just sitting there, you know, crying our eyes out. I mean, it was just incredible. Yeah, incredible. And that was the start of the journey.
Well, we are going to be talking more today about Pastor Al's book, Wendy, Beauty from Ashes. Wendy, Beauty from Ashes. And where can anyone get that from?
Well, I've actually this is my 7th book. And so all of them are available on Amazon. You can go to Amazon.com. That's the best place to go, is just Amazon worldwide. It's available in the paperback. You can have it delivered, or it's available in Kindle or ebook. And it's $9.99 in paperback and $4.99 for the Kindle or for the ebook. If you actually have Amazon Prime, I believe you can get the Kindle or ebook for free. And the book, prior to this breakout, the book was just, you know, for a self-publisher, I really appreciate having the opportunity to do, you know, events like this. I was just on Living in the Heart of Central Virginia a couple of weeks ago, and it was really taken off. In fact, I was supposed to head up to Northeast Ohio in a couple weeks to do a big book show there, and that's gotten canceled. So this just really came at a terrible time. It's never a good time for something like this to happen, but just kind of killed the book in its tracks. But every day we're still selling a copy or two. So it's really, I'm just humbled, because at the end of the day, Sharon, the other thing I really need to mention is I've been asking Sharon for 10 years, at least 10 years. So you've got to tell Wendy's story. And, you know, she had kind of filed those things away. And it was only after Bill died in 2018 that she came to me and said, I'm ready. We could do this. And it took over a year to do it. And 2 or 3 times along the way, she was like, I can't do this, because it was bringing back everything that she had kind of had in a safe place. And that's something that we can talk about. We talk about in the book. And so she's also kind of the hero of the book as well, and I backed off. Yep, no problem. I'll just keep the files. And then a couple of days later, she would contact me and say, nope, let's do it. Let's do it. And so it took about 15, 16 months to write. By far the longest book, that's taken me to put together.
Project,
And,
so
but
let's
a lot of
talk about,
questions.
because we're going to take a break here in about 3 or 4 minutes whenever Senior Ron is ready. But let's start with chapter 1. It's a girl. Let's go chapter by chapter through, and you can
Sure.
tell us what the content is, so that those who might think about getting the book are going to go, okay, this is what I'm getting into. How is this helpful to me?
Yeah, let me say this. The one of the most credible parts of the book is the introduction, or not the introduction, but the foreword by Brandy Hanks, who is, I'm proud to say there are 3 mental health professionals who have all endorsed the book. And she is a suicide survivor in 3 attempts. And now she works in the healthcare field, actually attends our church, wrote an incredible forward. So that starts it off right. It really set the tone. She was only writing an endorsement. I ended up using it as the foreword. But It's a Girl is basically the background. It's the story of how, when Wendy was born, what kind of day it was, a little bit about her background. Sharon, one of the things that really touched me was the way Sharon writes. And she just does a great job. She has a gift. I hope she ends up writing some other things. And it goes through, there's a picture of her at 7 years old. There's a picture of her with her best friend, Owen, great young man who's now married, has his own family, and stays close to Sharon, which is really cool. And so, and then there's a picture of her basically, with her friends in her sorority and stuff. And it leads into basically chapter 2, which is Storm Clouds Brewing. In other words, so it's a little history of her background, and then it starts to talk about some of the things that were beginning to go wrong.
Okay. So with that, we're going to take just a short break if Senior Ron is ready. Are you there?
I just had to unmute my mic, which is hard when you're trying to screen share at the same time. It doesn't let you. It doesn't let you do both. So, okay. Well, we have some questions this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whatever time it is where you are. First one is: are you tired of hearing all about the difference between the milk of the word and the meat of the word? Are you wondering when your church is going to get around to serving the ice cream and cheesecake of the word? Does your pastor take the whole Bible thing way too seriously? Well, then you need to check out the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. Everything at the Bible Buffet is prepared with your comfort and enjoyment in view. Everything there is gluten-free, trans-fat-free, and truth claim-free. And all their dishes are piping hot and ready to serve. And they're always open, even during the COVID-19 crisis. The regular Sunday specials this week include Aryan appetizers, Sibelian succotash, Galatian goulash, Gnostic nut salad, and Pelagian pie. And don't forget, the Bible Buffet is a fully accredited ministry of the Church of Smorgasbordianism. The Bible Buffet, it's not your father's worship experience. So check it out, and you can, they've been doing online stuff for ages. So you don't
right. They
even
were
have
into social distancing before social distancing was popular by centuries.
Right. Yes.
It's true. That Pelagian pie must taste interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's if you eat it by your own free will, and
I knew I should. You that was a setup.
and there's nothing original about the sin involved in putting on the weight. Okay. So, all right. Okay,
So,
there you go. We're back
next
to
chapter Again, we're talking with Pastor Al Stewart about his book Wendy from Beauty from Ashes, and I even have it framed on my wall here. If you see that.
Amen.
Next up, Pastor Al. So
Yeah.
we have the event. You have storm clouds brewing. What is that about? Chapter 2.
Yeah, that's basically starts to get into some of the things that were happening. For instance, she was date raped. A gentleman on campus had, she went to college. Gentleman on campus had taken advantage of her, clearly. So she was dealing with that. I think she was also dealing with some other, just some emotional situations going on. One of the things that I write in the book, and very careful about it, when there's a chapter, probably the most, I know we'll get there, but the most important chapter of the book, I think, is chapter 12, understanding suicide. But in there, some people have breast cancer, some people have brain cancer, some people have stomach cancer. There's others that suffer with a kind of the only term I can come up with is a mind cancer, just a torment, different things that are going on, which is why I believe that suicide is a case by case basis. I honestly, that may challenge some people theologically, and I make a case for that. I think I make a very strong case for that in the book. There are circumstances that we do not know about. Things happened to Wendy that really led to and then the next chapter, of course, is the event that really led to the event and what happened. And Sharon, that's probably the most emotional part of the book. She just opened her heart and wrote about coming home and going up the stairs, and she did not hold back about how when she got home in a snowstorm, was shocked that Wendy was even there. So it's really a heart-wrenching chapter, to say the least, but she is very honest and open about it. What happened.
I want to back up 1 second here, if I may, on
Sure.
your statement about theological considerations.
Right.
I would suggest a couple of things that might come into play here. One is the Bible tells us a lot about God and his interaction with us. It also describes, from a very human standpoint, our doubts, fears, and sometimes even pleading with God to take my life. We see that in the case of some of the prophets who had direct revelation. We see that in the case of David, who's just exasperated with, why on earth is this stuff going on? I can't stop it. You're allowing evil people to prosper, and here I'm suffering. Why is that? Job saying, it would have been better if I had never been born, even.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a very human reaction to life's issues, because we're fallen. We don't have clear thinking about how God is interacting with or using these kinds of things.
Yeah. What I'm concerned about are, the church hasn't responded. It's part of the church hasn't responded to this epidemic. We're in a pandemic, but let me tell you, there's a pandemic of suicide going on. And I don't know how well the church has responded. It's, certainly the Catholic Church didn't respond very well. Wouldn't even hold funerals for people who died via suicide.
And I'm pretty sure I had suicide in my family, in the Roman Catholic part of my family, and at the wake, it was questionable whether the priest would even show up for a long time.
Right.
This is about 20 years ago.
Yep.
Well, 25 actually. So did you hear that it changed?
It absolutely has. In fact, in the book, I write about the catechism and some of the changes that they have made. But it doesn't just stay there. There's a lot of, I don't want to, I can only use this word and if I need to explain it, I will. But ultra fundamentalists feel the same way, like black and white. If you take your life, that's it. You're going to hell. And I do not believe that. What I believe, it's a case by case, but it's like divorce. It's a case by case. But there are people who have had biblical divorces. I mean, one of the, and it's very frustrating. And I talk about that in the book because it's even hard for me to talk about because of some of the things I've heard some of the rather well-known preachers say. And I don't see God's word saying that. What I see is a case by case basis. And if there are extenuating circumstances and we are able to see them, how much more does God see that? It's a mind cancer. I don't know how else to put it other than it's like a mind cancer. There's already people who are susceptible to things. Then folks look at kids who are bullied. I mean, clearly I would assume you guys would say the kid was already fragile. And this just pushed them over the edge. And of course, we believe there is a place to go. But oftentimes, many of these people, they don't know that. And Wendy didn't know that at that time. But I don't know what happened in that last moment either.
I don't know if you saw the Luther film that came out in 2004. One of the opening scenes was a young boy committing suicide. And at first, he was not allowed a burial in on what do you call it, on church property.
Like church grounds, yeah.
Right, he wasn't allowed on ground that had been sanctified by the priest. But what happens in the movie is Luther gets himself all worked up and he goes out and digs up the remains of the boy and moves them to the church cemetery while everybody's watching, And now I'm pretty sure that's a fictionalized. That was done for dramatic purposes. But during the as he's burying the boy in the plot in the church cemetery, he makes this statement and he talks about how it's just as if he had been overcome by a wild bear in the woods. That's what the suicide, the depression. Right. that drove him to that. He compared it to a wild beast, and it turns out that is an actual quote from Luther. He did actually say that with some people, suicide is like they're overtaken by something that's just bigger than them, and so what they did was they made a story to go with that quote to kind of show you where Luther's heart was on that issue. So.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I agree with that statement that it takes you over. It's bigger than you. It's some people like to box it real easy and say, well, it's selfish, and there is a selfish component to it, I think. But it just isn't that easy to define. One of the things we like to do as people, and I think as Christians sometimes, is we like to box things and make them easy and give quick answers. It gives us comfort. It makes us feel better. But that's not always the right answer.
And also people who not always, but very often, people who do that haven't gone through it themselves.
Yeah. Amen.
Once you go through it yourself, you're hard pressed to say that there's a one size fits all answer for every time this happens.
Yeah.
Especially when your case isn't like the ones you thought they were all like. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've often, I live by a principle: a man with an argument is no match for a man with experience. I mean, that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. But another thing to lead into, we have a chapter called 2 years, 9 months later, which is Sharon's thoughts 2 years and 9 months later. Yeah. And then that leads into conversion. And that's the joyous part of the book, is how they came to the Lord. And basically, I still remember just praying with them in their living room, walking in the house and praying with the two of them. It was just a joyous thing. God brought beauty from ashes. I mean, that is a very good title. Sharon today, I am so proud to say, is still walking with the Lord, involved with Eagleville Bible Church up there in Northeast Ohio. And it's just a wonderful story. Bill served the Lord. I got a chance to go up and do his eulogy when he passed away from cancer a year and a half ago. What an honor that was to be able to go up there. And it's been tough for her because she's on her own, but she's not. She's got great friends around her. But then there's I think the second most important chapter is stigma and the blame game. There's the elephant in the room. What happens is when someone loses a loved one to suicide, that isn't the only one they lose. They start losing their friends. Not because the friends don't want to come around, but because the friends don't know what to say. They don't know what to do, so they stay away. But also, there's those who like to say, what did the parents do wrong? You know, it makes me think of when the disciples and Jesus encountered the man born blind. Well, you know the thinking of that day, the culture. Lord, what did he do that he was born blind? What did his mother or father sin? And of course, Jesus said this was for the glory of God. So we know that that's not always true. Plus, there's a saying, another dangerous saying, that the acorn always,
doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, that's not true. If that's true, look at Adam and his two sons. Look at Cain. If that look at one of the most godly people, Samuel. Bible says that his two sons did what was wicked in the sight of the Lord. And I can go on, and I cite many examples to say it wasn't the parents' fault. Again, look at the extenuating circumstances, case by case basis. Back up. You can't put this in a box and make it, and put a bow on it and have it sound nice. And so what I think we do there is we really get into, the truth of the whole thing.
I conjecture this. I think the church, because the church is made up of fallen people who are redeemed. We still struggle with some of that fallenness, even though we're redeemed. And so as a result of that, we tend to not deal well with difficult events in lives of those around us. And there's a kind of a fear, I think, that precipitates us from embracing those who are struggling and kind of putting some distance, because there's a sort of a fear that it could happen to us if I get too close. Now, if that's true, if what I'm saying tends to be true, that would explain why the church in general doesn't deal as well with this kind of thing as they might.
Yeah, that's excellent, Don. Great point.
Yeah,
that's why you're the host.
Yeah.
No, I'm the host because I have the guy with the microphone. I mean,
and hopefully you're not the host because you have COVID-19. But okay, so
I don't, because I social distance and I have done that a long time. So yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. I think I love hanging around with Jewish people, and I think part of it is because they tend to deal better as a culture with these kinds of things than Christians do. They have cycle of life teaching, and they kind of take you through, okay, here's what's going to happen, here's what's going to happen. And they have a whole process even of mourning. Someone passes away, and you sit Shiva for 7 days, where you are not expected to do anything. Everyone comes and brings food and visits you, and then really Orthodox, they don't even set a headstone for a year. Because you have to have time for grieving. So expectations are even changed. Whereas kind of in our Western culture, someone passed away. Well, that was like 3 days ago. Why are you holding out now? So we don't even give people time to mourn the loss of someone.
Yeah. Plus there's this, I don't know how prevalent it is today, but I remember it, 40 years ago, this evangelical subculture that says, if you're walking with the Lord, everything's going to be basically okay for you. You're always going to be on an even keel emotionally. And then when bad things happen, it won't shake your even keel. It won't disturb you. And if it does, then there's something wrong with you. This is it's just plain irresponsible. It is it's false theology. Just read the Psalms. People were struggling. Just try to read Psalm 88. Most of the Psalms where somebody's really struggling, they'll at least come to the place where they say, but I know that in the future I will rejoice, where that never happens in Psalm 88. you come to the end of it, and it's still just as dark as it was at the beginning. So somebody says, well, that's the Old Testament. And I just say, yeah, it's now too. Jesus was quoting the Psalms. The Apostle Paul quoted the Psalms.
Right.
It's not limited to the Old Testament.
Right, right. So you have conversion. So you might tell us a little bit about that, and then stigma and blame game. We just were talking about that at some length, and that's, I think, a really important consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. So the stigma, there, Sharon writes a lot of like do's and don'ts, which I think are very helpful. In other words, here's some of the do's, here's some of the don'ts. She really does kind of get into what you may want to avoid. Having gone through that, I think it's excellent. It's a great
Now,
guide.
when you say what you want to avoid, is that the one who has had a loss, or is that those who are trying to minister to those who have had a loss?
Yeah, like
who?
Yeah, like do's or don'ts for like for instance, holidays. Be sensitive at holidays. Find out early on if the person is comfortable talking about it. Like some people, they like Sharon. She loves to talk about Wendy. I know that I could call her and say, hey, and we can have a conversation about Wendy with no problem at all. Other people, that is taboo. You learn that up front. In other words, be sensitive to the individual. When to come by, or some people, should you call first? Should you, well, some things that seem like minute but are very important. There's a whole list that she goes through. What happened, by the way, is my phone started draining. So unfortunately, I'm holding the phone with one hand and I can't thumb through the way I'd like to. So I'm trying to build my battery back up here. Otherwise, I would get a few more of those things for you. But that's pretty much what it is. But we go through the stigma, and we show that the acorn oftentimes does fall far from the tree. That was a big one. So it's just getting rid of that idea that the person or the parents were to blame or they did something wrong. There's a story I also put in there this is another heart-wrenching story, but thank God they finally are going to do something. But you probably have heard about, in fact, they made a documentary about it, people jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And they've been asking them for years to put suicide barriers up that have 5-foot fence to go out, because only one person has ever survived jumping off that. And it's the story of a young lady who clearly came from a wonderful family. I read everything her father put out. I read some of her writings. Sounds like she was just doing great. Because another thing that happens is the parents oftentimes are caught just as off guard as we are. Right. And this young lady drove over to Golden State Bridge and parked her car. She was going to school in San Francisco, walked to where people often jump off, turned over and just threw herself 151 feet over and plunged to her death. And, the family's just utterly broken. And then some of the things that transpired there, again, things to avoid and whatnot. So there's really a lot in that chapter. And then the next chapter is things to consider. And that's kind of a companion to it. And that's where there's more to
before we do that, I want to take just a bit of a sidetrack, unrelated to this directly, but may have some implications, because you were mentioning that parents are not always aware of what's going on. Yes. And we actually have that with the church in general, where false teaching creeps in, and we're not really attuned to what's going on. We're not paying attention. We sort of trust those that we perceive are in leadership, when they may be incorporating sort of Hinduistic or Buddhistic philosophies into the church. And we have one of those sponsors.
Yeah, well, it's like it goes like this. So one day, Rob Bell was walking along, not watching where he was going, and he smacked right into the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama says, "Hey, you got Christianity and my Buddhism." And Rob Bell says, "You got Buddhism and my Christianity." And then they decided that it's not all about truth, but experience. And isn't taste one of the best experiences? Two great faiths that taste great together. Reese's, Jesus, Buddha cups. You want to go out and get those right now. So, and you just never know until you bump into somebody and you find out.
That's right. And then you
That's right.
find out, and you're not aware of it until you go, oh, this tastes so good. Except it's a combination of falseness and some truth.
Falseness,
So
That's right.
falseness and truthhood.
falseness and truthness. so
Falsefulness and
Terrence,
truthhood.
so your companion chapter to that, the follow up is what?
So the next chapter after that is things to consider, and things to consider exactly what it says is just many of those things, the do's and don'ts, and some different thoughts about how to deal with friends who have lost a loved one. Just some helpful insight. Sharon's drawing from her experience, looking back. So I think it's a great chapter to learn from, to gain some good experiences from someone who has been there. And then after that are poems and prose, and within there are just some beautiful poems that were written. Many of them were written by folks who had loved lost ones, and so Sharon, these were some of the ones that really ministered to her. And so anybody who has lost a loved one will appreciate chapter 9. And there's some beautiful prose in there. I have to say that. I also put in there a song that I wrote. I also write songs. I'm a drummer, musician, playing the band. And I wrote a song called Blue Gray Sky, which was all about Wendy. It's actually called Blue Gray Sky, Wendy's song. And I actually have an interesting 15-minute fame story. When I wrote it in 2003, we sent our demo out, and I got a call from a guy named Jim Hitt out of New York City in 2004. This was about 6 months after I wrote the song, and we sent out about 50 demos. He was the talent coordinator for Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And of course, he called, and I hung up the phone like, these guys, I thought it was the bandmates teasing me and joking around. I hung up on the guy. He calls me back. He goes, listen, why don't you try me on this number? And so it's a different number, 212 area code, New York City. I'm in Connecticut, close by. And the lady answers the phone, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And it turned out that Conan had a farm in Woodbury, Connecticut. And somebody gave him the demo. And he listened, loved the Blue Gray Sky. And the name of our band was Middle Aged Dream. We were all in our 40s at the time. And, late 40s. And they actually wanted us to come on the show, but at the last minute, he asked me, who are you signed by? And we were not signed by anybody, but I had an attorney, and I had copyrighted the songs. And he said, Al, if you get signed, let me know. And so I had some connections through people I knew with Iron Butterfly, an old rock band from the 60s. We ended up getting signed by Olive Tree Records out in Florida, called back about 5 months later. But I wasn't supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be here with you on this program, and this is where I'd rather be. So just an interesting note that we were supposed to go on in May of 2004. He was going to book us on Late Night with Conan O'Brien to do the song. Kind of a cool little thing, but the song's in there and the words, and it really is a song about Wendy and about, suicide prevention. But then after that are people reaching out in the guest book. Powerful chapter. In the end, Sharon agreed to do this book for one reason. It's the same reason I wanted to do the book, because if just one person reads the book and decides not to take their life, it's all worth it. And I'm pleased to tell you that if you go on Amazon and look at some of the comments we've had and some of the notes, I can tell you that God has already answered that prayer. That's already happened. But these are people's accounts of what Wendy's page did for them. And thank God she saved them, and they're in there. And then, of course, after that is really the meat of the book. And that's understanding suicide. And I don't say that pretentiously, like I've got all the answers. I don't. But I think we got a pretty good theological handle on the subject of suicide there.
Okay, good. So they can get it at Amazon.com.
Yes.
And we have been showing, in fact, here it is again. We'll do this again.
Thank you. Yeah, just type
There you
in, you can type in Reverend Al Stewart, R-E-V Al Stewart, or, and all my books will come out, or if you type in Wendy, Beauty from Ashes, book should come right up, and it'll be right there. It's also on a couple other places as well. I think it's on, it's called BIM books or BIMI books, but it'll all lead you to Amazon. So Amazon's the best place to go.
So
Okay, so
then
when they type in Al Stewart, they don't want to get the Year of the Cat. They want to get
No.
one of your books. This one particularly.
so the last chapter, why I agreed to tell my story. I assume that's all Sharon.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it sounds like there might have been a while. It might have taken her a while before she thought she would do that.
10 years.
10 years.
10 years, Ron. She was very reluctant.
So I don't want a spoiler necessarily, but is there anything you can tell us about that chapter?
Basically, I mean, there isn't. I don't think anybody's going to be overly surprised when they read it. But in there, she talks about how important it is to her that, and I think this is important to any person who has lost a loved one, how important it is to her that her daughter's life, that she didn't die in vain. I'll put it this way. Jesus put it this way. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it bears no fruit. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And that's kind of what she's saying in that chapter, is that Wendy died, but new life, beauty came out of the ashes. First, it came to her and Bill. And then, of course, they have been able to minister to many others, reach many others. So Wendy, although she's not physically with us, she really is still with us. And she talks about the fact that that's why she was willing to write the book.
It seems to me that we can make a generalized theological statement, and that is that every tragedy has a purpose. If it doesn't, then we serve a God who does things without purpose. Now, some people seem to have no problem with that, but I have a problem with it. I think I don't think God allows unnecessary tears to fall, especially down the cheeks of his own children. And by necessary, I mean, this is what he believes is the best instrument in our lives for drawing us close to himself. And it may temporarily result in us running away from him. I mean, Jonah ran away. Other people run away, but ultimately it's something God uses to draw us to him. That's the best purpose of all. So
yeah, that's great. That's great, Ron. There's a song by a band that I like. The drummer just died, Rush, and they wrote a song called "Roll the Bones." Roll the dice. The song is saying, "Why are we here? We're here to roll the bones. We're just here to toss the dice." And what you said is true. We are not here to just roll the bones or toss the dice. Life is not random. Jesus said that when the disciples were in need in Matthew 6, he said, "Look at the sparrow, the least of all birds. If that doesn't fall from the tree without my Father's eye seeing it, are you not much more?" Well said, Ron. You're right. I don't believe a tear falls from anybody's cheek without God's notice, and that there isn't something going on. The problem is, oftentimes, like in Wendy's story, you're going to get the background and it's going to make sense. We look at all these tragedies that are going on, like even with the virus and what's happening, but no one's watching the backstory. I'm glad to say that God is sovereign and there's always a backstory. Thank you for that, Ron. That's true.
Thank you. So.
Okay, I'm doing some research here, Ron, because someone said that they were just getting black, but
is Don there?
Yeah, can you hear him?
Yeah, no, I can't hear him.
You can't hear me?
I can hear him. I don't know.
Are you there? Are you there, Don?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm
here. Can you hear me out?
I'm talking.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't hear Don.
That's weird. Okay.
That is weird.
Well, I'll tell you what he's saying. He's saying he's doing research. What's the research you're doing, Don?
Well, someone had said that the screen went black, and so I'm
Screen went
looking, and yeah, we're on YouTube fine. We're on Facebook. Facebook seems to not be there. I'll have to double check on that one.
Seems like we're having multiple glitches here.
Well, I have to tell you, during the time of social distancing, because tech support is scattered out across the
Yeah, I can only
country.
hear you, Ron.
Okay, we're talking about various issues we're having on our different platforms. You're saying that we're not being broadcast on Facebook at the moment?
I don't seem to see it. We
doesn't,
were, but now it seems to be gone.
And
So
Al can't hear you. And maybe if Al, if one of you guys left and came back in, maybe.
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Okay.
Let me sneak out and I'll come right back.
Okay.
And for those who are watching, as long as you can still hear me, I'm going to go over here and do something real quick.
I can hear you.
Can I hear myself?
I can hear you.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Al just left. I hope he can get back in. We usually don't like to spend portions of the program dealing with tech issues.
Well, they can be interesting. Maybe we could do while we're waiting for Al to rejoin us, we could do our news update really quickly here if I still have that. Do I have that?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. Let me do that.
Is this the Babylon B news update or some other?
I'm sorry?
Is this a Babylon B update or?
Yes. Well, it's the one we started off with, just so people can be aware that a new study has come out on Babylon B regarding this virus, which tells us that study COVID-19 impacts men, women more than all other genders combined. I found that interesting. Babylon B, by the way. So
we are
one fake news outlet, CNN, would call this other one also a fake news outlet. The difference is this one is intentionally fake news.
Yeah, it's at least admittedly fake.
Admittedly fake, yes.
So what happened to Brother Al? Well, good thing we covered the whole book.
Yes, it was, and he'll be back eventually, I think. However, I want to just mention, by the way, unrelated to Al's book, but related to our book, Richard Rohr and the Enneagram Secret, which is available on our website. It's available at BookBaby, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle right now, and you can pre-order from Amazon, but not get it until after May 13th. So that's unrelated to this book, just brazen advertisement of what I am doing.
Shameless self-promotion. Shameless acts of self-promotion. Well, is there any way we can get in touch with Al to see what's happening?
Well, maybe I can try to text him. Why don't I put it up and you can do a song and dance of entertainment of some kind?
We can do a little show. But, suicide is an issue that doesn't really come up that frequently in Christian circles. It tends to come up when maybe a celebrity commits suicide, and then you'll see a burst of social media discussion on the issue, and you'll see all these different opinions come out. I don't remember the last time a celebrity Christian committed suicide. I don't remember it happening. Do you, Don? When someone who had a Christian profession of faith took his or her own life? I don't remember, but you can only imagine what the conversation would be at that point. You'd have a lot of people probably saying, well, that person was never a believer to begin with. There's just no way a believer would do that.
Right.
Okay. Al's looks like he's returning. He's returned to the fold.
There he is.
Hey,
miraculous appearance, almost like a resurrection, but not quite.
Can you hear Don?
Well, I was transported and I met this Ethiopian eunuch, did a baptism, and just got back.
It's just amazing. You have to save that story for another time, though. We have much more interesting things to talk about. We're just discussing what might happen, because we can't recall a time when it did happen, and I can't recall one at all, where a professing believer committed suicide, especially like a celebrity type. Um, but you see the usual pattern in social media of people sharing their opinions very often very thoughtlessly, uh, like saying things like, that person couldn't have possibly been a believer. They're obviously in hell right now. There goes Al again. He's back. Okay. So, the Bible doesn't, the Bible does contain stories of suicide, and it does not present them in a positive fashion. In other words, we're talking about people like King Saul. We're talking about people who, okay, Al comes
Go
in.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're talking about it's usually portrayed as taking place with people who we're pretty sure are not believers. Uh, but it's pretty sparse. I mean, how many suicides can you think of even in the Bible? Can you think of any, Don, other than King Saul and
Judas.
Judas? Yeah, he's not exactly a hero of the faith.
No, but you didn't say that. You said, are these suicides in the Bible? And of course, Judas would be one.
Well, are you guys both familiar with of Jared Wilson, the Calvary Chapel pastor? Just we're talking 6 months ago. He professing believer.
Yeah. Who was?
I mean, that
had blogged or tweeted or whatever a lot about suicide. That was his bailiwick, so to speak. He was interested in that subject, and then he ends up committing suicide. That's my understanding.
Well,
of his background.
I'm just so you guys know, I'm having a lot. Yeah, I'm having a lot of. Long story short, he bipolar, suffered from depression. In fact, he was beloved on the campus there with worked on Greg Laurie's staff, and basically did the funeral of a woman who had suffered from depression, who took her life, and he went home. And he actually, it's in the book. I talk about it in the book, but he wrote how people suffer and how Jesus is always there, but sometimes this gets back to what I think Ron, you were talking about, or Don, you were, in that opening the Luther film about it, just things getting so dark. And he just said, Jesus always does that, whatever. And, he took his life. And of course, the next day his wife put out a note, and he left his wife, 2 young kids. She said, I know I'll see him again. Greg Laurie said the same thing. And, so
it's
tough.
Yeah. I would, no matter how dark, I'm going to say this, and it's not meant to be insensitive. It's not meant to in any way minimize the suffering of people who do commit suicide. But please understand, there are people who commit suicide when suffering is way up here, and there are people who commit suicide when they lost their job. And okay, so in other words, they have
case by case basis.
Right, case by case. But I'm going to make a generalization, and I don't want it to sound as though I'm saying they're all the same, because they're not.
Right. Amen.
But every act of suicide really is a selfish act. You're not really thinking of anybody but yourself. Now, okay.
At the moment, right.
No, you're not. Now, granted, though, the pain can be extremely intense that the person is going through. And so I look much more sympathetically on a person who has been suffering for a very long time with a very difficult problem, and they just don't see light at the. I mean, based on my earlier statement about the beast attacking the child, and he was overtaken and overpowered. I hope everybody understands. I am sympathetic, but if there's one thought that might stop a person who is going through, let's say, the slough of despond. Let's say you're really in the darkness, you're really in the valley of the shadow of death, and you really don't see any way out of this other than to take your own life. If you could think basically 2 thoughts. One is it is selfish. It's still going to be considered selfish. even if God forgives you, and I believe he does forgive suicide, and think of the people you're leaving behind. Think of the grief that you're going to cause, and try to hold on to the fact that it will get better. Try to hold on to that.
Yes, and see, it is always judged by those of us who are left behind, which is why we call it selfish, because it's judged. But to that person, at that moment, it's a whole.
I understand.
It is right.
Yeah.
Al, if anyone wants to reach you, how would they go about doing that?
I can be reached in a few different ways. My email is rev.stew@outlook.com. So you can contact me at rev.stew@outlook.com. That's a newer email I started for this type of thing. You could also catch me on Facebook. I actually have a Pastor Al Stewart page. So if you go to Pastor Al Stewart, all my books are listed there, everything. That's probably the best way to catch me.
That probably is. We don't want to give too many because people get confused. So
Facebook, those two areas. Yeah, those two areas would be good.
Okay. Ron, you want to walk us out of here?
All right, let's get the show on the road and give credit where credit is due. There we go.
Thank you, guys.
Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon, and D Opposer, our Mormon archives manager, is Polygamous. Our liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yolig Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisamini. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happen. All right. Pastor Al, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Lord bless you. Hey, stay safe in Florida and out there in Missouri, where you are, Illinois, and you guys all be safe. And hopefully, Don, I'll see you. Lord willing, I hope we still get to see each other at the conference in July.
Yeah. So, all right, you two hold on a second. Everyone else, adios.
Adios.